Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Thanks for joining us. This isn't our usual interview day. It's usually Thursday, but Supconnect is so wonderful and accommodating. They let me do it on a different day because I'm joining a group of women for the next 4 days on a women's adventure trip down to Baja, which I'm very excited about. But what I'm excited about right now is we get to talk with Dr. Audrey Lee. She's a stand-up paddler and based in Utah, but lucky for myself and quite a few others, she travels quite a bit, so I have the pleasure of knowing her also. We'll talk about how she's come out and done some training with us. She's instructor, like many people I talk to, they do many things in stand-up paddling, and she's trained as an instructor for the actual act of stand-up paddling, but her education is in sports nutrition. I'll have her share a little bit more about that. She is a doctor in that and has so much valuable information. I've had a chance to learn some things from her, and some were real eye-openers, even well into being active in this sport. So again, thank you, Supconnect, for letting me do these interviews. Really having a blast. Continue to talking to the different, interesting, fun, great people in paddling. And I'm going to join us right now from, I think she's at home in Utah. Although, like I said, she travels quite a bit. Are you at home?
I'm at home.
Yay.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us. Super excited to know your story, because I'm sure there's things I don't know about you, even though we have had the chance to meet and get to know each other, as I just mentioned, if you heard, because you travel and come out here to California. And most recently in the last year with performance paddling, where we have both trained, and that is my home training ground. During COVID, our coach, Anthony Vela, pivoted, and he did some online training, and including having you as a guest speaker. And that's where I first, I knew you were a doctor and I knew you did something in that area, but really had never picked your brain. So I learned some great stuff, and I'm sure I'll learn some more today. But let's start though with your paddling story. Where did you first see stand up? What got you hooked?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for having me. It's an honor because usually I'm watching all of these heroes in the SUP world and like, you want me to be on there? Are you serious? So
Yeah, you're one too.
greatly honored, greatly honored. But I was thinking my first time ever on a stand-up paddleboard was 2013. There's a place here. I live in Park City, Utah, so I'm in the mountains. It's known for skiing. It's not known for paddleboarding. But I was invited by a friend, and I thought, sure, why not? Why not? It was a free, try stand-up paddleboarding, and it was fun. And I remember a little pond here. It's not like there's no ocean here. Little pond. They showed us some little stuff, and I was like, that's cool. What else? Is there anything else? Because I was like, okay, so you just stand and you paddle around. Like, is there anything else? And then I saw the person doing pivot turns. I didn't know what they were at the time, but I was like, I want to do that. So that's just a little insight into my personality. I am a coach. I'm a sport nutrition coach. I'm a performance coach. And I usually coach people set realistic goals. I don't set realistic goals for myself. I'm like, what's the hardest thing? That's what I want to do. So I teach all kinds of fitness classes along with the things that I do, but I teach yoga, and there was a person at the club that I was teaching, and she was looking for a sub for her SUP yoga. And she was like, hey, do you think you could sub a class for me? And first of all, I was like, I've never taught on a board. And she was like, well, come and take my class and then you'll get a feel for it. And I was like, all right, why not? So I went and took her class, and I just had so much fun. So my background prior to all this stuff, I grew up as a dancer, gymnast, and swimmer. And so all of those things just came together. And I took that class of hers, and I mean, pretty much it was like, I'll sub all your classes. Absolutely. And it was just, if you do yoga, I mean, yoga is being present, being focused, but to do yoga outside brings a whole other element because you are connected with nature. I mean, that's why we paddle, right? I mean, to get outside and to feel the sun shining on your body, to see the beautiful blue skies, to see the water and friends. But then imagine you're doing all that stuff and you're doing balancing poses on a board, moving around. Like it just changes the whole experience where you have to be present. And, yoga is about being present, being conscious, being mindful. If you're not present and you're not paying attention to what you're doing, boop, you're going in the water. So that was how I started paddleboard yoga. And I mean, I would stick around after class, people would leave and I would just play on the board. And so one day I'll have to show, but the first thing I did, I just started doing gymnastic routines. So I was doing the beam, like what's the closest thing to this? And so I'd walk around and I'd do things and I'd move around and just had the best time. And so the shop that I was teaching at, the place there, the owner wanted all of the employees to do a race. And it's like, all right, I'll do a race. I mean, how hard can that be? How hard could that be?
Sports, so.
I come from sports. Yes, so I was a competitive swimmer and I ran and did all kinds of stuff. So I'm like, I've never seen paddleboard racing before that. And so it was like, we'd paddle around in our little pond where we're protected by the mountains. There's never any wind. There's never anything going on at all. So that's all I knew. And I was like, yeah, this is going to be great. It's going to be easy. So we had that race in Utah, probably about like a 30-mile, another reservoir. So we have reservoirs. And on the day of that race, it wasn't the Jordanelle. It was actually at Rockport. It was at Rockport Reservoir. And on the day of the race, it was so windy. I'd never experienced that before in my life. And I have to also note, like, I had just learned to do a crossbow turn like the day before. And I was like, I got it. It's easy. I show up and I'm standing there like, so needless to say, it was definitely challenging, but I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I mean, I was fighting, and so from used to like, oh, this is super easy to absolute opposite extreme. Like this was the hardest thing ever. I couldn't even stand up and trying to turn. And these nice people were there, trying to coach stuff. And I'm cursing like, rah! But I finished it. And it's not like our races are humongous races at all. We had an elite group, which was maybe like 5. And then it was open, which was everybody, all board sizes, male, female, everything. And it was like 9 people, And so like, that's how our races are. And but after that, I was just like, I got to do this. I'm going to do this. And so tying into my sport background, sport nutrition was like, okay, I can figure out the training. I can figure out, the nutrition, but the technique, I mean, it's so technical. And so that's what led me into spending more and more time out at Baby Beach and training with performance paddling, because this has been my best season in my life so far.
And that's a great thing to be able to say coming out of the pandemic. Yeah, I'm very excited for the direction it is all heading.
Yeah.
In terms of your coaching of performance and nutrition, I think you said you have worked with cyclists quite a bit.
I have. Yes. Yeah. So that's my original background. I mean, I come endurance sport, and especially with nutrition, or maybe just happens to be with the school that I went to. I went to the University of Innsbruck in Austria, and there was, that's where I got my Ph.D. and I got it in German. And at the time, so it wasn't intentional. The only way for me to stay in the country was with a student visa. So I happened to be there and I was like, oh, I'm going to hang out in the country. I'll get a degree. I mean, I wasn't planning on getting a degree. I was enjoying Europe. I was a cyclist at the time, where I gotten into cycling, and it was cycling the Alps and just loving life and implementing everything that I learned with training and learning how to cycle. So out there, I became a competitive endurance cyclist. So my distance was centuries, 100-mile races.
Wow.
So that's where you have to have your nutrition on. It's like anything. It's like, if you're not fueled right, you're going to feel it. If you're not hydrating right, you're going to feel it. If something is off, you're going to feel it. And so that's where I learned. And it was really learning.
Like this is so important, and we don't talk about it enough. And I think it transfers, everybody listening in might not be a racer or but so many people go out on the water, but you're not on the water drinking the water. And like the things like nutrition and hydration, they don't always think about. And some people go out for long periods of time, and it's really, Dave, sorry, he just said, I need more power to shred. That is
yes.
business. I should have mention that from the beginning. That's how you will find her on Instagram and her website and everything. So, but I just think it's so important. And even though maybe our races are not as long and not a century, we're not a super fast sport. So time wise, we are out there doing our races for longer periods of time for a shorter distance, right? So I think I ignored it at the beginning, thinking, oh, anything under an hour, right around an hour, it doesn't matter about your hydration and nutrition. Well, it does.
It does.
And then we do a
Yeah.
lot of races that are a lot longer. I have a 13-miler Carolina Cup coming up.
Coming
And
up.
everything is super important. So I'm listening. So really appreciate like all that you have to share. Maybe can we
Happy to
start
share.
with hydration?
Mhm.
Because that was a real eye opener to me. Because to me, hydration is water, not just water.
Yeah. So not just water. Let's start off with with hydration and nutrition overall, it depends on what you're doing and how long you're doing it, right? So first, just think of what's the intensity of your activity. If it's light versus race mode, right? Those are going to completely different variables. And then also the distance that you're going. Like if it's a 3K, 5K, 10K, all of these things, there are going to be different needs in regard to your hydration and to your energy. So first is hydration to focus on, because we are predominantly water, if you just think about it, right? So all of us are human beings. Our bodies are about 60% water, our brains 60 to 70% water. When you're dehydrated, it's going to affect your overall performance, not just paddling, it's overall performance in life, where you're not thinking clearly and you don't realize it, or you're not focused, you're not able to concentrate, retain information. And that might be just as simple as drinking water, right? And so that's the starting point. The starting point is water. And I'll probably jump around, and I apologize for anyone. Please let me know. But so water is something that most people don't pay attention to, right? But it's the recommendations, more or less, World Health Organization says for men, like 12 to 15 glasses of water a day, and for women, 10 to 12. And that's just baseline, right? That's your starting point. So we usually know the 8 times 8, right? So it's 8 glasses of 8 ounces comes out to 64. That was in the past. And now higher recommendations, that's just for baseline, not being active. Once you're active, then the next is, okay, what are you doing? How long are you doing it? What's the intensity? What's the environment that you're in? So big difference where I live in Utah, when it's paddleboard season, it's warm, but we have such low humidity. So that's why in the winter we've got the powder snow, because it's so light. There's barely any moisture. And then whenever I go to California, my whole skin and my body changes. Like, it's so happy because there's humidity. But humidity also changes your sweat, so there's a lot of different stuff going on. So start paying attention. This is to anyone. Like the first is, are you drinking your water? So that's the starting point. Water, which can come in different things. You can dilute some fruit juices, or you can add sliced fruits or sliced vegetables to give a little bit of flavor. It's kind of a way that you can make your own like vitamin water, if you will. But that's a starting point water-wise. And then the next is when you're training. Say, imagine, like, I'm just going to use the example of the performance paddling. So you sign up, you're going to train with the group, you go there, you want to be hydrated going into your training, because if you're already dehydrated, most people don't pay attention. So start paying attention. One thing that I like to tell people is your throat. If your throat is dry, that's usually a sign like, I need to drink. And so just starting to pay attention to the signs that your body is giving you, because it's always giving you signs. And once you're in tune, then you're like, oh, I know what to do. So you want to be hydrated. But another thing too is you don't want to overhydrate. And I'll never ever, we all have these experiences when you try different things out. Don't ever make any nutrition, hydration changes on race day. Try them out training first, right? That's going to be a number one. So I want to premise that too. It's like, try it out so you have an idea, so that you're familiar. So then when it is race day, you're like totally confident, and your body is ready, you're mentally ready, and you can do the best that you want to do. And so that means being hydrated going into your training so that you're not dehydrated, and fueled. But the water is the starting point. Once you're starting to train with more intensity and time, then you want to be thinking about energy. which you can incorporate with your hydration. So the different energy mixes, there's tons and tons and tons of different mixes. This kind of gets into like, you want to read labels. Look at the labels. If there are ingredients that you can't pronounce, that's usually a sign like, should I be consuming this?
Although I know there's buzzwords come and go a bit, but I've definitely seen certain
Yeah.
ones quite a bit. I'm not, we'll get into this with the pre, but I
Mm-hmm.
remember an aha moment when you were talking about sports nutrition is different because you're a very healthy person in your life. I think you're vegan or vegetarian, and
I
I
am.
know you eat healthy all the time, but we're focusing on this. And I was interested to learn that things are important like caffeine or
Mm-hmm.
creatine and BCAAs and some of these new words that I'm not familiar with, but that really do play a role. But yes, important to
Mm-hmm.
read labels, and I'm still learning.
Well, we've got a series and we're going to continue teaching because to me, it's education, right? Education, knowledge is power. Once you learn, then you can make the best choices for yourself. And so that's in the blurb background about me is that I wanted to be a professional athlete growing up, but I have a really strict traditional Chinese father that was not even allowed. It wasn't like you don't even consider that. Like that's not an option. So I had to be a doctor or a lawyer or a business person. So I did an alternate route and became a doctor, Ph.D. in exercise science, which also was like, that's not what we were talking about, but that's what I did. But what I learned is like, okay, if I can't be a pro athlete, I can learn how you can optimize your performance by your training and by your nutrition. And another something, periodized training, periodized nutrition, right? And so once you start understanding the body needs energy, the body needs water to perform everyday life function, right? That's baseline. Then once you start exercising, there will be additional needs. Once you start exercising more competitively, and you're doing races and you want to be, top 10, top 5, podium, that's a whole other area because you just keep getting more specialized and more specialized, and your body has very specialized needs as well. So that's where you fine tune, right? So you fine tune, there are going to be differences in a distance person versus a sprinter. There are going to be distances in a male distance person versus a female distance person because physiologically we're not the same. So there isn't, and this is where it gets tricky because people want short and sweet, tell me what it is. And I can't give you that. Like I can give you a generalization, and this goes for everybody that are listening here live and later on, is that I'm giving generalizations. If you want more specific information, reach out. I'd like to offer something to help people because that really was, I fell in love with paddleboarding. I absolutely love it. And I mean, like this past time that I was there when I got to race off the couch, like I mean, just the whole love of the racing came on back. Like, oh, I can't wait to do this again. I started thinking, like, I'm gonna have to figure out, like, next year I got to come out even further and plan out my race schedule and all that kind of stuff. But that takes planning, right? So once you understand your body needs, then okay, if you're doing a long course, you're gonna have different needs. If you're doing the short course race, that's gonna be different needs. So you and yourself are gonna have all these different needs. So once you start to understand, then you can fine tune so that you can perform your best. And that's where my focus is. Like, hey, learn what is nutrition, what are the foods or foods that you need, what hydration do you need, and when do I need it, and then just prepare and plan in advance. And that's always the thing, plan ahead of time because it takes a while for your body to process whatever you put into it so that you actually can use it.
Yeah.
So
And that's what, when you say periodized, you mean like if you're on a 12-week training program, nutrition planning should be part of that too?
right, yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
There
So
is a
then
lot to this. And like you said, it's customized, but I appreciate you sharing some of these generalizations. So hydration,
absolutely.
we got your baseline and nutrition, but there
Mm-hmm.
is certain things pre-race, during the race, if they're long especially, and
Mm-hmm.
post-race that it'd be fun to talk about a little bit.
Yeah. Well, then let's start off with just to make sure we're all on the same page. So, foods, generalized foods can be categorized of one of three categories, right? So, carbohydrates. We've all heard the term carbohydrates or carbs, right? And most people are like, nope, I don't do carbs. Like, okay, if you are a paddleboard person, if you're a paddleboard racer, reconsider your relationship with carbohydrates. You should love them. Just be like, I love you carbohydrates because your body loves them. It's the body's preferred fuel source and it's your brain's exclusive fuel source. So if anyone has ever gone on low carb, usually the first like, oh, my head is killing me, right? You've had that before. Or also if you haven't had food in a while, you're like, not feeling so good, got kind of a headache. That's your main fuel for your body. Includes some examples. Fruits and vegetables are carbohydrates. So I want to start with that because most people are like, what? Like, yeah, fruits and vegetables are carbohydrates. Fruits and vegetables are carbohydrates. They contain fiber. So when you're training, racing, maybe not the main focus. Okay. Then other parts of carbohydrates, grains, tubers, or potatoes, sweet potatoes, right? So grains that you know, wheat, any wheat products, those are carbohydrates. And the other grain related products are also carbohydrates. But then the tubers are potatoes, sweet potatoes, root vegetables. Those are also carbohydrates. Those are the ones you want to focus on when you're doing big, long stuff. For people that are doing Chattajack, don't start doing this now because it starts this Saturday, but you would have been starting to carb load for Chattajack and you would add those things into. So there's one client that I've been helping to prep for this race and we've been building. Yeah, so pizza, donuts, French fries, all carbohydrate sources. Yes, but they also are very fat carbohydrate sources, right? Billy goat running. So I want to, so pizza has, so let's give some examples too. So pizza, the carbohydrate comes from the wheat that's in the flour and it comes from the tomato sauce. And then depending what you're putting on top, that's the protein and then that's your fats, okay? Donuts are mostly fat with some carbs and sugars. French fries are tubers, but they're mostly fats depending on how you prepare them. So it all depends, right? And so proteins we know, animal products, red meats, white meats, fish, seafood, legumes. And I happen to be plant-based vegan, so I eat legumes. You probably are not going to be eating meat or seafood or legumes when you're on the board. It's just not going to happen, right? But when you're off the board and when you have time to have an actual meal, then you have that kind of stuff. Fats come from all kinds of things, but mostly, you know, like oils, butters, nuts, and seeds. And so when you can use these to fuel you, you want a combination of them when you're not training so that you have a slow digestion, slow release of energy. So now I'm going to start talking about the before, during, and after. Okay, so everyone understands, I'm hoping, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, what they are. And their purpose, I didn't explain all of them. So carbohydrate, main fuel source. Protein's main purpose is to build and repair your muscles, muscular tissue, so the fibers. When you're going really super hard, and I'm just going to say, whenever I come back to performance paddling, Mondays are super intense days because I do the morning workout and I do the evening workout and it's intense. And so that's where you want to make sure in between you would add all those different things because the protein, I need the protein to help rebuild muscles so that I can be strong, right? And that's for all of us. We all need some protein, but it's the proportions that are important as well. So long story short, let's start focusing on training. Right now it's 1, 2 in the afternoon. Say we're going to train this afternoon, 5:30, 6 o'clock. About now is a good time to start getting some fuel into our body. You can have a nice meal that would include combination of the different carbohydrates, a nice lean source of protein and healthy fats, because right now you have about 3 to maybe 4 hours of time for your body to digest this food. So you have an actual meal. Maybe you go to, I don't know, fish tacos. A lot of people love fish tacos. Do fish tacos, make sure you have some nice rice in there because the taco shell is the main starchy carbohydrate. And if you don't have rice in there, then it's probably beans or, you know, beans with fish or just the fish and a little sprinkling of maybe some tomatoes, some salsa. So it's not really like energy dense unless it's super fatty. Then you're getting your fuel from fat, but that's not the main fuel that we want. So add some rice to that. Does that make sense to everybody? And that's again is when you have time. Like when you have time, then you have a meal because it takes time for your body to break it down. You chew it. It doesn't get processed until it, I do a lot of sound effects. It's got to come down here and then it's processed. Then it gets released into your bloodstream and then it's available for use. And so if you've ever experienced, you're out racing, you don't have enough energy. Have you ever heard of that term where you hit the wall? or
Absolutely.
we've
Been
experienced it, right? You've been there. If you've been there, you know, you're like, oof, I don't ever want to have that happen again. And so then that's where the planning comes in. Like, okay, I'm gonna make sure I have a good lunch so that I'm fueled. And then maybe, so say if it's 1:25 right now in California, right? And you know you have training 5:30. Okay, so you have that meal, and then you might want to do a little snack before training. Like you might get there while you're unloading your board and you're chatting with everyone. You might do you can do like a nutrition bar. And I'll talk more about bars, but the less time you have, the more easily processed food or simple, so some people use those terms: complex carbohydrates, simple carbohydrates, like a banana, right? Like a banana would be super simple. You eat that, energy release pretty quick. You can do an energy bar. Some people like doing the chews or gels. Those are almost instantaneous release of energy. So once you understand that stuff, like some people like to do that before a race. They take that gel, they get online, let's go. So that's something that you can do too. Again, in sport nutrition, what I was going to say vernacular, they're like fill your stores. So the comparison is to a high performance car, that if you're going to go and drive distance, I'm going to drive to California, I'm not going to start with a empty tank or a partially filled tank. I want it completely filled. And so it's that idea as well, is that going into your training, when you're fully fueled and hydrated, then you can maximize the training itself. Because you go there and you're like, okay, coach says we're doing this at 90%, and then we have 30 seconds rest, and then you're doing 90%, like that you can actually give 90%, and then you get more out of it. So that's the before. And then the during, depending on, some people will carry bottles with them. Definitely encouraged, because I'm sure you and other people have experienced when you're paddling around, like you said, you're on the water, but you're not drinking that water. And you get to a point where like, oh, I'm kind of dry. I could use a little something, right? Especially if you're training and I was going to say sandbar buoy 1, sandbar buoy 2, there's wind, there's this, we're trying to draft, all this stuff is going on. And that little bit of hydration can make or break your performance. And so if you had a little something, just a little something to stay hydrated, that's number one. Definitely. If you could do that, add that. And again, if you have regular practices, start doing that to notice how you feel. Especially too, like if there are certain courses that say, this set distance, I paddle to the bridge and back. It's typically takes me this much time in these conditions. Then try it out another time. Like, oh, I'm going to do what Audrey said. Let me see what it feels like if I drink some water, right? And I don't mean like tons and tons of water so it's jiggling around in your stomach so that you're comfortable. You definitely want to be comfortable, so you don't want to take in too much. And notice how you feel. Maybe, and then hopefully you'll feel a performance change right away. You're like, oh, I got faster. All I did was drink some water. Yes. That is one of the little things that can make a big, humongous difference. So that's one. Water is going to keep you hydrated, and that's what we want. But when you're sweating and you're pushing and you're training, then you want some energy because you're expending energy. So you also want to maintain energy. The idea is the energy that you're using or losing, you want to replace that energy. So again, when it gets into a longer amount of time, then maybe you take a combo, a sport nutrition drink. And this is where it's really important to read the labels. Look at the labels and see, because just because it says sport nutrition drink, just because it says training, whatever, look at the labels. And that's what I like to tell people. Like I can go and bring into the kitchen for show and tell, but the nutrition facts are on the label. That's what it says. Those are the facts. So once you know how to read those facts, that's information for you to help yourself so that you can perform better. And so little sips of water or little sips, depending on the powder or drink that you use, it should be a low, there's different recommendations, but I would say low 6%, 4, 6, perhaps maybe 8% carbohydrate solution. So it's not a major high carbohydrate. It's slow. It's a small amount so that your body can process it, but it's enough. So if you're usually training, you're not taking in that energy, you're giving your body more energy. and you're helping to stay hydrated because it's in liquid form. Does that make sense?
It
And
does.
if
But
you want
then
to ask
there's,
any questions to
what
clarify.
about electrolytes and the replenishment part, I guess, of the drink? That's
Hmm.
different, isn't it, than the nutrition?
Similar and different. Yes. So when you look at the mixes, you want to see carbohydrate in there. So we'll see typically it starts total calories, then it goes into fats, then it goes protein, or protein's at the bottom, carbs, fiber, right? So those are in the nutrition facts. Then below, you'll see things like vitamin C, or it will say potassium, sodium. Those are also in there. But so electrolytes are essential for body function. And the main electrolyte is sodium. So when you sweat, that's the saltiness. And when you're sweating a lot, you lose the salt. And so if you're training and you're outside and it's sunny and you're out for extended amounts of time, that's where that's where it kind of changes. Water to electrolyte water with energy. So it's kind of like this spectrum based on what you're doing, intensity, time, kind of starts sliding over, starts sliding over. So the electrolytes, as said, the main one is sodium, then there's potassium, magnesium, calcium. There, you need those to maintain muscular function. When you're just drinking water and you're sweating a lot and you're not replacing the electrolytes, your body doesn't absorb the water well or doesn't fully absorb. So you may have heard of hyponatremia. This is, it's typically seen with marathon runners that don't run at a hyper competitive pace. They drink water at every single rest station, and it's almost as if they are drowning themselves from the inside. They're just taking in water, but because they're not taking the electrolytes, the body cannot process and absorb that water. So it's just kind of, it's not fully absorbed. And and again, so please reach out with questions. And I don't mean just now, like afterwards, so that I can clarify this, because again, I'm giving generalizations. I'm not trying to scare anybody, but just to be conscious and aware,
Yeah.
right? So notice if you train, some people sweat a lot. Are you a salty sweater? So that means like if you wear a cap, especially it's the colored cap, then you can see like saltiness there. Like that's a clear sign, like, oh, I lose a lot of sodium. There's testing that you can do, physiological testing that people want to find out. Cyclists do this stuff. So that, I mean, a lot of the nutrition information comes from cyclists because you can control the environment. You can sit them on a bike and do all kinds of testing. Like, can you imagine, how would I test you on a paddleboard? I'd have to be next to you, drawing blood, doing all these measures. Like, it's so hard. And then if you're waves, movement, like you can't do that. But on a bike, you can put them on their trainer. You can set all the conditions. It's super easy to do. But yeah, so the electrolytes, you can do electrolyte tablets. There are powders. There's all kinds of different brands. If you have any questions, and I was going to say, like, this is what I do in the clinics. Yeah, where people like bring the products that you use and let's read and look and see so we can understand what is in this product. Is it meeting the needs that you have for your body? So electrolytes, typically in a sport nutrition drink, you'll have the energy, which is in a form of different variations of sugars, and the electrolytes are there because if you're pushing yourself and exerting yourself, you need, I mean, this is common sport nutrition knowledge. You need the energy in form of sugar and you need the electrolytes. So they're there. Does that
Yeah, that
help?
is interesting because I happen to be looking at one. Oops, I wasn't going to show
Good,
it.
good.
Which is a less expensive Costco version.
And it
But
works.
it does start with a whole bunch of types of sugars, but which is funny because in regular nutrition, you're watching often to not have those
Absolutely.
things. And I'm sure
Yes.
certain types are better than others, pure cane, dextrose, citric acid. But then it has the salt and the potassium and the sodium citrate
Hmm.
phosphates. So
Yes.
the
Thank you for bringing up
minerals.
that point, Kristen. So there's a difference in nutrition recommendations for health and wellness, and then nutrition recommendations for fitness, sport, and then different recommendations for performance sport, right? So the
Okay.
sugars, when you're not training, we're not doing that stuff. Yes, sugar is associated with inflammation, with weight gain, with, type 2 diabetes, like all of these different things, because our body processes sugar the same, but if you're not using it, then it stays in your body, and those are the long-term effects of it. When you are an athlete, then that sugar that is being released is being used. And so that's the difference,
Yeah.
right? And so when you understand how your body functions, and that goes back to, again, the performance training, like we know how the body functions. And so when you give it what it needs, it can perform your absolute best. So this is something to consider for people that are, joining. Just start thinking about that. Like, do you ever have this feeling that you could do better? Like, I really feel like I could do more. I mean, have you tapped into your full potential? Most likely not. And so if you haven't really focused on your hydration and nutrition before, this is a big, 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 big component that you can start refining, and you will feel differences. You will see differences. I don't want to say guarantee, but like I pretty much can guarantee when you figure it out, like it's like night and day. All of a sudden you're like, I'm invincible. This is amazing.
Love it.
And then let's see. So the last one is then afterwards. Afterwards. So after your training is recovery. Recovery is super, super, super important, because typically what happens, you finish your training. If you're training with a group of people, and that's why I love coming out there, is because there are people to train with. I usually train by myself. But you finish, you take your board, you have to put your, load it back up. And typically people, maybe they have a beer, maybe, right? Maybe you have a beer, or maybe somebody doesn't have anything at all. They just drive home, and then they got to figure stuff out. That whole time from, you finish, you have to get off of the water, you have to bring your board and all your gear to the car, you got to load it into the car, then get home. That could be half an hour, it could be an hour, it can be 2 hours. That is your window of recovery. So again, going back to, we understand how our body works physiologically. They say there's a window of opportunity for recovery, and it varies half an hour to an hour. I try to tell people as soon as possible, as soon as you finish, as soon as you get to the dock and you stop paddling, that's when the clock starts ticking. Bing, like this is your recovery time. If you're not taking advantage of that time, then it takes longer to recover. So once you know, like, hey, the ideal time to focus on recovery is as soon as you're done. So bring something with you. I do that just because I know, and so I have that, and I've trained that from cycling. I do that when I'm skiing, where I have my stuff. I come down and I got my bottle, and I've got my recovery drink. That's the first thing. Liquid is the easiest way for your body to process and absorb. So you can do a recovery drink. Again, goes back to, we talked about what's the most important, carbohydrates, and then protein. They go hand in hand when you take them in half an hour to an hour after your training, because metabolically we're still revved, like we're primed. This post-exercise oxygen consumption. So you're still like, that feeling of when you bake, like say if you bake something in the oven, you turn it off, but it's still hot. There's heat. Your body is processing, and it just, right, you just trained, and then it wants like, I need fuel, I need fuel, I need fuel. You give it the fuel, it pulls it in, and it takes it to your working muscles, right, goes on in there. So it replaces the fuel, and then the protein gets taken with, like, come with me, goes into your body as well, helps recover the muscles. So what you want to be looking for, look on the nutrition facts labels, look at the numbers that you see there, carbohydrates and protein. It should be in a ratio of 4-to-1 or even 5-to-1, which just shows carbohydrates are so important. So here's an example, super simple. Say 20 grams of carbohydrate, it should just be one gram of protein. So does that, typically it's the opposite way. So read the labels, because I have people saying like, oh, I've been doing these protein drinks. Like, great. Well, what does it show? It shows opposite. Usually shows like 8 grams of carbs and then 20 to 25 grams of protein. That actually is not ideal for recovery. So if you do have something like that, add a banana, or maybe do half of that drink and then you add some other stuff. Have a cookie. And this goes back to when we were saying, it's like, yeah, you usually wouldn't eat these cookies, or you wouldn't do that stuff. Like, when you're not training, then you wouldn't do that. But when you're focused on performance, you want to refuel, or, other things. Does that make sense?
That's great. And it's good news too. It's
When you're like, I could eat a
helping
cookie.
you recover to actually eat some things that maybe at other times aren't the best to eat. Drink, though, it
Yes.
sounds like getting it in your body as soon as possible, liquid if possible, because that's
Mm-hmm.
faster while your body is still working and ready for it. Yeah,
Yeah.
great.
and
Great
continue
information.
hydrating and continue hydrating. So now all you have to do is pack this one extra bottle of stuff. You have your beers, you have water, and then you get there. Have that first. Then you hang around and drink and talk with everybody, and you're like, hey, I'm already covered, you guys. What about you? And then they're going to be like, wait a minute, what did you do? So, but you'll start to feel the difference. Like, oh, so try it out. Try
Yeah,
it out.
great. Great information. Well, one of the things we usually talk about is equipment, and we've got the Audrey side of it and the Dr. Audrey Lee side of it. So I'd love to know about like boards and paddles. You've been both instructor and racer, and anything you want to share. And then, I know you're not working for any particular company, and I know there's a lot out there. But if you have any favorite products, and then along equipment, I mean, I think you kind of mentioned some of the things like if you're going to
Mhm.
take your hydration, we have unique needs. I mean, the paddleboard is the bicycle of the water and it's used in a lot of different ways, but we are
Yes.
on the water and our hands are busy. So maybe
Hmm.
some ways to get hydration on board.
Yeah, so
For
that's
you.
a really super good one. Equipment wise, I'm on the original gear that I started with, and I didn't know any better. Again, where I said like these unrealistic expectations. So when I started, I actually maybe I should tell the story. So like I live here in Utah in the mountains. I fell in love with paddleboarding. Then I started looking up, and the talk was like, you got to go to PPG. Like PPG, what's that? Ooh, and like performance. It's like Pacific Paddle Games. There's Dana Point. That's like the mecca. That's where everybody goes. And then I was like, that's where I got to go. So I did the 2017 PPG, and I went out, and I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea what I was doing. I actually raced that on a 14-foot red Paddle Co. inflatable board. And I had my Quick Blade 83. I didn't know. They were just like, here, use this board. Like, okay. And the only person that I knew actually when I went there is like I knew Mel Weigel. And so I was like, I'll just follow her. That's what I'm going to do. Like, I don't know. I'm just going to follow her. So I remember when it started and I was like, oh man, I don't know what to do. So then I just thought like, okay, think about open water swim. It's like an open water swim. I need to go out that way, get into a line, like, okay. And then I'm just going to draft her. Like, I know what to do. Okay, great. Went out and tried it. She took off. And I remember there was one point where I looked and I was like, I thought somebody was holding me or something. Like, who's, and I was barely moving at all. I was like, man, I got to figure something out. So that was my starting. Like I started with that. I tried all kinds of boards. Like, as I said, because I come from SUP yoga. So we started on Pauhanas. I was on Pauhanas, nice big, I mean, huge deck pad, plenty of room, super comfortable. People are comfortable on those. So people that don't have the best balance, like those are really great boards. I use Glide a lot, Glide boards. They're local to Utah.
Mhm.
And I have to say, like for Glide boards, if you're a yoga person or whatever, I can do cartwheels on them. I can do like never ever. If you know a dancer pose is where you're standing and you hold your foot behind you and you lift it up. I can do that on a Glide. I haven't been able to do it on other boards, but I remember because there I was like, I can't believe how stable this board is. So those are some cool boards. Like we tried all kinds of, it was basically whatever they had. They had every board. And you're like, try this board, try that board. They all have a different feel. But for paddling, so the board that I am on an Infinity Whiplash. This is the board that Candace Appleby won the 2016 PPG. And I ended up getting that board because it was on Facebook. It was on the Facebook. And I think Mel actually sent me, she's like, there's a board on sale. I think you'd like this. And I was like, oh, that's my board. So and right away I was like, yes, I'm going to buy that board. And I just figured like, I don't know how to paddle, but I'm going to learn. I'm going to learn on that board. That was it. That was it. There was no, I mean, and that's it. So that's what I'm on. And I mean, super fun board. I love that board. I mean, and I think it's more than just the board, it's the vibe, it's the people. When you know the person or people or family that has created this and they've taken this through love and passion, you're like, wow, amazing, amazing. And so I mean, I'd love to try more. I Where I live, I don't have major storage because that's also an issue. So 12.6 is plenty of space. Like anything more than that, I store it on my car in the summer or on the floor in the garage. And then in the winter, I store it at a friend's place in southern Utah because I don't have space for it. But I would love to. I mean, it's just the 14s, like everyone's saying, like the 14 is the way to go. You got to go to 14. Like, that'll be for the future to try that out. And especially, for racing and just how much more you can glide per paddle stroke on a longer board. Like, that'd be super cool.
You are
Ah,
petite though, so you do have to think about volume and all of that for you and one that's made for you. But yes, all great companies. You mentioned a whole bunch of great ones. And again, there's so many different boards for different people. And we have similar race boards. So of course we love that family and company infinity. And then in terms of hydration and
yes.
packs, and how do you take nutrition and hydration with you while you're
hmm
paddling?
That's tricky. So it's definitely tricky. Um, Camelback, I mean, they're probably the most known brand. People just use the term Camelback for all packs, like a pack to carry your hydration. And so you can carry up to, I mean, liters, 2, 3 liters in a Camelback or a similar type of, where it's a bladder and it has the tube and it's a backpack. And so and then the tricky part is getting that nozzle to be in the right spot and not have it move around. I mean, so in this last race, I kept like, it was here. There were times it was up my nose. It was pushing my sunglasses and it was like, ah, even though I know this stuff, you just have to practice because conditions are different. Like you have to know if you are using one of those, is it chafing? Where can you connect it? Practice. So this is another one of those, practice on your board so that on your race day, you're not trying to struggle and figure out how to move with this thing. Definitely practice. So that's one way with your hydration. Bladder, you can put your sport nutrition mix right into the water, and maybe you get a few different bladders so that you can clean them in between and all that. But that's a really nice and easy way, so long as you have it positioned at the right spot so you don't have to stop or do any major things to reposition it. So there are different brands, but find the one that works for you. I think really the most important is once you know your nutrition or hydration needs, like I'm going to drink a liter in an hour for sure. Like, okay, so I got to have a liter. If it's less, if you're used to drinking less, then drink less. But this is something that you've already tried out in practice so that like, hey, in a 2-hour practice, I typically drink this much water. When I'm going to be racing for 2 hours or 1 hour, then you'll kind of know what your numbers are. So, but try out the different things. So that's one, hydration wise. Some people like to do a pack and then they have the bottle. And this would be more for training because, I mean, you have to stop paddling to take the bottle because you can't paddle with one arm. Maybe some people can, but right. So that's another. You need to figure out like open the bottle, squeeze, place it back, close it so you're not losing your hydration when it's in your pack. So that's another something. Those are my 2 recommendations for hydration. For nutrition itself, that's also where it gets tricky because if your bars and things and chews and gels, they melt, they move around. You have to be able to, again, you're going to have to grab, hold, and place. So one thing, if you like to do gels, and if they work for you, what I suggest to people is tape them to your board. Tape the top side down so that all you have to do is rip the gel and it opens the gel and you just squeeze it right into your mouth. Then you have the empty packet. You can stick it into your shirt, stick it into your shorts, and you just move on. But then you get your energy and because you need the energy. So that's one that I like to recommend. Some people have pockets and they put things in their pockets and you pull it out of the pockets, but I find that distracting personally. If you do the chews, I have one client who made a chew necklace when it was not hot and sweaty, and so it was just there. So used dental floss and put them on there and just had a chew and it's right there. So this way you don't have any packaging, you don't have to worry about it. We had also talked about what if you were to melt some of these chews, because some of them say you need 3 of these little ones. What if we just melted it so it's just one big one instead of having to carry these little ones? So those are some things that you can think about.
Yeah. I forget who I got it from, but some pro uses small little bladders, but
Mm-hmm.
they put their goo in there with water and
Yeah.
make it easier. So they almost drink their favorite gel,
Mm-hmm.
but something that they keep in a pocket. And again, just how you get to it and how, yeah. I
Yeah.
keep things in my
Practice.
mouth sometimes and go back to paddling, and I've had varying success with that. So even 11 years into racing, I still am trying things out. But I'm excited about that secondary thing you said. I never had really thought that for practice, since it's interval practices where we do have
Yeah.
stops, that it is okay to have a bottle, that you can use your hands. So I just
Mm-hmm.
got myself one, and it happens to have 2 bottles. So I might have to make
Perfect.
one my post nutrition and one my
Mm-hmm.
during. So hydration with
That's
electrolytes,
great.
right? And then the other one
Yes.
with the 4-to-1 ratio of carbs to protein. Did I get that right?
Yes, you
Yeah.
got it right.
Oh, I'm
Things are
excited
paying
to try this
attention.
out. Yeah.
So that's fun. See, that's something that you can try out and you'll feel the difference right there. And this for other people, maybe you do, if you have two, one can be just water because some people just want water. But then you have the other one that has electrolytes and can have some of the sugars or, a sport nutrition drink. And then you just have this and you have this because sometimes they're really sugary and people don't want all that sugar. And so that's another option.
And I did find that as someone who does love just water to drink sometimes,
Yeah.
Chattajack requires you to carry at least two different 2 liters. They want one taped to your board and one on you, which is great because
Yeah.
it's kind of forced education.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want anybody completely getting dehydrated or passing out. But the one on my board, I ended up leaving there and just leaving water in it so that I could have a variety sometimes. And I just
Yeah.
put an extra long hose on it.
Oh,
So
that's
yeah, it
good.
did take a scoop of the hand to lift it up. And I'm sure there might be, I've seen people do some interesting things with lanyards and hanging maybe like if it had a long cord from your board or as a way to get to it instead of, yeah, again, that doing it on your
Like,
shoulder or
mm, mm.
can be challenging. Um,
Well,
but
you know
yeah,
what is interesting at that last race was talking with people because other people had that issue as well of it moving around. Like, we need to design one because a lot of these, these bladders have one length. Like, find the length that works for you. Maybe you need to cut it because you can cut it and then you put the nozzle back on. And then
mhm.
instead of, because I had to like move it and then turn it and then had to make sure that it wasn't kinking, then I wasn't getting any fluid so that I can have it at the right length so it wasn't like sticking out everywhere. So that in and of itself takes a little bit of time. But once you've got your system down, like then and you don't have to ever worry. Then you just know, like, I'm going to be hydrated. Everything's cool. I can focus on my cadence. I could focus on drafting. I could focus on my line. And then you don't have to worry about that other thing.
Yeah. And we've talked about this in terms of other accessories to paddling, or some of them are things you must have, but we have adapted a lot and are just using what was made for a different sport. And in a lot of
Right.
cases that works. On the other hand, there are tweaks to it. For instance, the length perhaps of how that works, or how it works because we're not using our hands to get to it, that there might be somebody clever out there that could invent something. I know there's that soft wire that
Yeah.
some people use to put it more out in front of them so they can just get to it. But again, there's all that testing of making sure that it doesn't get in your way in any position that you're in when you're paddling.
Hmm.
I think you need a product line too, Dr. Audrey Lee, to go with your performance coaching.
I like that thinking. And you're like, what? Yeah, because we really were. We're all standing in line afterwards, after the race. You're like, if we only had this, why isn't there this? Like, okay, well, then let's do this. Let's make it. So, people out there in Supconnect land, I'm going to ask for volunteers like, okay, we have this. Let's try it out.
Yeah.
Because how do you know? You got to try.
And report back and all of that. Well, we're getting
Yes.
close to the end of the hour, and I want to hear a little bit more about you and your dreams. I love that I hadn't heard you describe yourself as you are a go-getter. The fact, I think a lot of us, as much as we love our community, you have to have some independence and some drive to do things like go someplace by yourself, whether it's to a race or to sign up for paddling or to show up at a PPG. So I congratulate you on that, and I think it takes that sometimes. But do you have places you haven't traveled to you'd like to go? Any races you'd like to be? You have some goals out
Absolutely.
there? You talk about goal setting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my dream, it comes from what I used to do as a performance coach for cycling teams is we had our team spread out all over the country. And when there was a race, we'd get everybody into race location a week before and we'd get everyone settled in like, hey, we're going to get into the time zone. You're going to get into your nutrition, get everything set so that on race day, like you are completely primed. And I absolutely love that. Like that to me was the closest to if I could have been that athlete there going through those camps, like that's my dream. And so when I first got into paddling, then I was like, somehow I got to create something like that of just imagine where you don't have to worry about work or any other things that you worry about. You come in before Chattajack, or you come in before a PPG or Battle of the Paddle or Off the Couch or Carolina Cup, whatever, where instead of driving, you arrive exhausted and then you have the race the next day or whatever. Imagine being fully rested and relaxed, not having to worry about food, nutrition, every single thing that you want. Your specific stuff is all there laid out for you. You just have to perform. That was what my job was. My job was to make sure that athletes came in and they were fully taken care of. And a lot of them weren't used to it. They're like, what? Like, you're doing this for me? Like, yeah, that's our job. Your job. I mean, you signed the contract. You're a pro athlete. You got to come in here and perform. But we're going to take care of everything else to make sure that you can perform your absolute best. And so I would like to, after this year's, like, I would love to be able to dedicate one full season to paddleboard and to see how good I can really do with coaching. I mean, because one thing that I did, like, this year is the first year where I started off 2 weeks with performance paddling, and then I finished the season a week with them and then raced out there. And this is the best that I've ever done. Typically I'm just training and I'm doing things, but to have a coach and to have other people to motivate you and challenge you even more, it's like you just learn so much. I mean, just before that race, you told me some things like, okay, think about this. Then like, wow, that was so helpful. But on my own, I'm like, all right, I'm just going to do the best that I can do. And there's only so much you can do by yourself. You have motivation and, drive, passion, but then the knowledge and experience that you can gain from others. So I would really love to just dedicate and see how good I could get. I mean, like that would be amazing. I would absolutely love that. And I'd love to paddle the whole entire world. I mean, and I don't mean like that way, but like, the world is a huge place. There are so many bodies of water. The people that I've met through paddling, I've met Germany, Panama, Mexico, other places in Europe as well. The 11 SUP 11 city tour. I have two friends that do that regularly. They're like, this is my 7th one already. Like, that would be another cool one, but that's pretty intense. I mean, that's one where like, I have to train for that. So, and I heard that there's one in Thailand. There's 11 city SUP tour in Thailand. Like, that would be really cool. Like, lots and lots of cool things. I mean, I want to learn how to SUP surf. Like, I don't know how to do that. I mean, yeah, there's so many things. And so, long story short of all of this, after Off the Couch, I mean, I had so much fun at that race. And like you said, that to me is adventure racing, because they just like, hey, you just meet at this place and whatever, like, okay. But when you're traveling and you have, like, I had to borrow gear and I'm going here and I'm going there and I don't know about this, and I wasn't really taking it seriously, like, all right, whatever, I'm doing the short course. And then like, no, you got to do this course. Like, oh, I'm going to do this course, like all these different things. And, and then to just go there and be with your friends, colleagues, but then also like top paddlers in the whole entire world. And you're like, wow. I mean, I just want more of it. I mean, to me, it's like, I just want more. I just want to learn as much as I can. And in so doing, help others, because I'm an expert in my area and I'm trying to bring that expertise. The more that I can learn, the more that I can share with others, because this is not only about performing on your paddleboard. When you do all of these things right, you will also improve your health and wellness. They go hand in hand. So once you understand all of these, like, that would be amazing if everyone can just be like, I'm even better than I was yesterday.
Yeah. Wow. I love your goals, both as an athlete and that you want to share. And we appreciate so much all that you've shared today. I'm going to mention my end of the year big race is Carolina Cup, which does have something towards what you did in cycling, in that I think 3 or 4 days before the race, they start offering clinics, and they have a lot of different pros giving clinics, but almost all of them are on water. I don't think they've had a few of them have done. I think Fiona Wild did a motivational type talk. But I think your niche has not been covered enough. I've talked to only a couple people in this year of interviews about nutrition. So there's only a few of you doing this kind of thing. So if you can balance it all and be an athlete and still push yourself, and then throw in a few workshops and things, I think both in person and online, I think
I'd love to do that.
would be in high demand. So,
Thanks for planting the seeds.
yeah, again, sometimes Instagram cuts us off at an hour. So I always want to make sure that we say thank you to Supconnect and to everybody who's
Thank you,
listening,
Supconnect.
and to you, Audrey Lee. So much appreciate your time. Power to Shred is her Instagram and website, and you can find her on Facebook too. And hopefully meet her at a race someday. Joseph saying thank you to us
Thank you,
both
Joseph.
for being here. Yeah, saw a lot of names that we know go by. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us. If your friends missed this is recorded. It immediately goes onto Supconnect's IGTV, so you can find it there. And then probably by tomorrow, we'll have it on Supconnect's YouTube and KT Outside, which is my YouTube. So other people can learn from you too. And as Audrey said, she's
Evelyn.
welcoming your questions. Do you know Evelyn? Have you met her before?
Yes, yes.
She's someone who also came to California every year for quite a few years with her husband, Christian. Yeah,
Mm.
for PPGs and Battle of the Paddle. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Appreciate your time so much. Take care.
You take
I saw it snowing already in Park City. Enjoy your winter sports, but know you can always come here for sup surfing or sup racing.
Thank
Maybe.
you, thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you so much, Kristen, and thank you, Supconnect, and thank you, everyone that joined. And do reach out if you have questions. Instagram, I'm usually on Instagram. This way I can help you more.
great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Mwah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.